Hi friends, I'm Scott Giles and welcome to Saturday at 2:30, the video podcast that I shoot every Saturday afternoon at 2:30 Central Time here on Facebook Live and later put up on my YouTube channel. Today I want to talk about listening, the art of listening. Now, I'm a life coach, I'm a board certified member of the National Guild of Hypnotists. I'm also a clergyman. And when I was in theological school, we were trained in the art of pastoral care, how to work with people in a supportive, emotional way. And at the time when I was in theological school, the late 1970s, the stress was on the craft of active listening. This comes out of the work of Carl Rogers, who created the concept originally in 1957. Active listening is actually one of the most difficult things a person can do with another person. You listen to them, but you don't let your attention wander. You focus totally on what they're saying. And then you periodically reflect back to them by repeating a paraphrase or a metaphor, or in some way you check out that what you have heard is what they actually were attempting to communicate. When someone engages in active listening with you, it is a profound experience, and you can feel deeply ratified that another person has truly heard you. Now, as part of my credentialing, I'm also a certified coach with the HeartMath Institute. And in HeartMath technology, we talk about the intelligence of the heart, based upon the proposition that science discloses that the human heart actually processes information independently of the brain, and that it communicates that information up to the brain through the nervous system. In the HeartMath system, we talk about coherent communication, which is communication, basically active listening, combined with what we often call heart intelligence. So there are three levels. Level one of coherent communication is simply active listening. The goal is to understand what the other person is communicating. Level two is actually a negotiation. The parties both say what they are trying to communicate. You may active listen back and forth. The goal of this is understanding to get to a point of view where you get where the other person is at the same time where they get you. The goal, clear articulation, and typically this stays in the realm of ideas. Level three of coherent communication is a kind of profound sharing. Heart intelligence is an agreement between ideas and emotions. So when you are attempting to communicate that way, the goal is actually relationship improvement, getting the emotion of the other person as well as the ideas. An example will make this much more clear. My practice being a specialty practice and working with individuals who have life-changing medical problems, it spans the entire political spectrum. I have clients of every political persuasion. And I was talking to someone who was very upset about our recent presidential election here in the United States because they were backing the candidate who has lost. And they were saying that they understood the election was fair, contrary to a lot of the rhetoric going around. They weren't claiming that the election had been stolen. So at the level of ideas, the person was simply saying, the election was fair, but I'm sorry my person lost. Well, that's a superficial level. As you listen with your heart to that person, you also hear the sense of loss that they're experiencing. They had an anticipation of a kind of future that will not take place. And that feeling of loss is something that they don't know how to put into words, but if you listen to their tone, you watch their metaverbal and nonverbal behavior, In addition to their ideas, you also get a sense of their feeling. And that's level 3 of coherent communication, where, yeah, I get the surface ideas that you uh, don't feel the election was unfair. And, I don't feel it was either. So we agree. But while we agree about that, uh, this other person's experiencing a very profound loss. And that's what I wanted to pay attention to. So that's coherent communication. It is a step deeper than active listening. For those who employ the heart math system, this is one of the things you're trained in, and it does make your interpersonal work a hell of a lot more effective, and I highly recommend it. Now, when you're engaging in this kind of studied listening to another person, it becomes very important that you also pay attention to boundaries. And the reason you pay attention to boundaries is because it's easy for something to shift in the listening encounter and the locus of control to move in a way that's not healthy. For example, if someone's telling you their hardship, it's great to hear them. It's great to communicate that you do hear them. It's great to respond to them not just with their ideas, but also to their own emotional world. However, they're not you. And unless they are, a dependent child or someone, you're not responsible for their life. And you're not obligated to fix them. Parish clergy often get into this problem. I was a parish minister for 13 years as I was completing my training to be able to do this work. And what happened to me at one point, I had someone come to my office. Now, this was in Oak Park, Illinois, kind of the yuppie capital of the Midwest. And this person wanted to open a private practice in psychotherapy. And they had a credential, not probably the most obvious one, but they had a credential that would let them do this work. And they wanted my support in referring people who are looking for a therapist to them. Well, as I said, this is yuppie capital of the Midwest. I mean, there were 5 therapists in every street corner and 2 more hiding under the sewer grating. I mean, the list of referral sources I had was pages long, and I had backups for my backups. But I agreed to put this person on it. But as we wound up the conversation, a shift occurred. And she went from telling me what her hopes and worries were, and her aspirations too, to asking what was I going to do about them. Well, it's not my job to market her practice as her parish minister. And she was clearly expecting me to agree to do that. And I didn't, because that's unprofessional. And in fact, the reality is if someone's looking for a therapist, they probably don't want someone who's a member of the same religious congregation that they belong to themselves. They want someone totally separate who doesn't ultimately come to know more about them than perhaps they should. And that was what made so clear to me, this danger of watching your boundaries when engaging in an intense listening experience. Because the other person can make that shift and think, well, you really are listening to them and you get them, and therefore you're also going to solve their problems for them. And you got to find a way to set that boundary in place and say, no, I'll put you on the referral list, but that's all I can do. I can't actively promote you. That's not fair to all the other people who would like me to actively promote their practices too. Pay attention to that. When you engage in profound listening, you got to be very clear you stay on your side of the boundary and not end up in a codependent situation where you're over-caring or over-functioning for the other person. In training, most clergy people today engage in something called a clinical pastoral education, or CPE. This is a period of learning off-site, often in a hospital or some other similar setting, where you're functioning as a chaplain. and under close supervision by experienced supervisors. And yeah, you learn to actively listen and to communicate well, and this is where you also learn about boundaries. I certainly did. Now, one of my uh, support programs for people living with cancer was located at a hospital which came to be not just a general hospital, but was purchased by a healthcare system that was denominationally specific. And their chaplains were not trained through the CPE system. They had some sort of a biblically based training program of their own. And some of these folks kind of gave me pause as I would observe them. One day, I was present in the emergency room waiting area with one of my participants who was manifested signs of a heart problem. Chemotherapy can cause that. So I got them to the emergency room and I stayed with them until they were seen. They were fine. But I watched one of the other hospital chaplains work with someone in the emergency room. And this person, I've seen her before, she always had this big grin on her face about anything, even when the topic was totally inappropriate to be this big, kind of shite-eating grin. This patient had just been given information that they were terminally ill. Now, this is an ideal time to listen, to hear their pain, to hear their worry, to let them know that there's another human being who gets them and can accompany them. But that's not what that chaplain did at all. She put this big grin on her face and she said, "Oh, how wonderful! You're going to be with Jesus soon." And I said to myself, that has got to be the most incompetent piece of pastoral work I've ever seen a member of the clergy do. That's what happens when listening goes wrong. When the person gets involved with their own stuff and isn't attending to the person they're listening to. I want to just end this little video with a joke that my wife, the Reverend Dr. Lindsay Bates, would sometimes tell from her pulpit during the 40 years when she was the parish minister of one of our congregations. I'm probably going to tell it a little bit differently than she would. About the difference between men and women sometimes and how they approach listening. So Jane said, "John," her boyfriend, "I want you to hear me. I don't want you to try to fix what I'm saying. I just want you to hear how I'm feeling, because I'm really feeling bad. And I want you to hear what my feelings are and not try to respond to them, not try to explain them away, not try to make anything better. I want you to just hear me." So John looked at her with a bewildered expression and said, "Well, what good would that do?" And I'm afraid sometimes the interaction between men and women goes wrong in exactly that way. Don't do that. Learn to listen. Learn the art of listening and coherent communication. It will serve you in very good stead. Thank you for your time and attention. I'll be back next week with a different talk. And if I can be of help to you, please feel free to reach out. It does help me if you'll share these videos with other people that you encounter on social networking. And take care of yourself, stay well, and stay safe.